Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. This video we're going to be talking about Pisces season 2023. And so here we are, we've come to the end of another astrological year, right? The solar year that we track in astrology as the sun moves through the 12 signs of the zodiac. And here we are in Pisces season, Pisces being the 12th and final sign of the zodiac. And all that implies, right? We think about Pisces as the sign of endings, of closure, of preparing for the next cycle, new beginnings, the seed that gets planted to be reborn in the next cycle, starting with Aries season at the spring equinox a month from now. So there's a lot of resonance with the sign of Pisces, and when we think about it, aligning it as we do in what we call the three-letter alphabet of astrology, where we align the sign and the house and the planetary ruler and kind of combine those themes. So Pisces, 12th house, Neptune, the modern ruler. We also should consider Jupiter as the traditional ruler of Pisces, which gives us a much bigger explanation and understanding of the sign of Pisces. Literally, right? Because Jupiter is all about bigger. But it's about Neptune, Pisces, 12th house, transcendence, right? It's about the oceanic oneness. It's a very spiritual, rich sign. It's all the other signs combined in a way. If we think about Pisces in this way, it's a very, as I said, spiritual. It's a very mystical. It's a very musical or creative sign. It tends to rule poets, musicians, filmmakers, right? Fantasy, imagination, so many ways that we can describe this incredibly rich and deep archetype, right? Mutable water, and the ending of things. But I thought, as I was thinking about describing Pisces, I was thinking of the great 20th century astrologer and writer Dane Rudhyar, who often had really interesting ways of kind of keynoting each of the signs and the houses and the planets. And I was thinking about his way of describing Pisces. I'm going to read a very small excerpt from one of his books. This one's called Triptych. This was published in 1968, very small Dutch publication. This is an original hardcover, one of the gems in my personal library. Dane Rudhyar was one of the great astrologers of the 20th century, sort of one of the forefathers of the humanist approach to astrology that many of us practice today. And he started writing in the early 30s and wrote well into the 70s. So he was a very prolific writer and thinker and a very profound human being. And I'm just going to read one paragraph here, because his description of Pisces was courage. And I think it's one we don't often associate with the sign of Pisces. Courage, we think more Aries or Leo, right? We don't think of courage when we think of Pisces, but here's his take on it. And he says that this is the gift, is the bestowal of courage. And he says it's easy to romanticize about the meaning of these last moments of any and all cycles, and to become enthralled by the Neptunian glamour so often identified with the symbolism of Pisces, the last winter sign of the zodiac. Psychism and passivity to the unconscious, boundless compassion and the rapturous openness of the mystic to the unknown beyond, can indeed characterize some of the manifestations of the Piscean type of human being. But if one stresses these transcendent and elusive traits, which are secondary results rather than basic attributes, one tends to ignore the very factual and unavoidable confrontations experienced by conscious and thinking people whose temperaments make them eminently sensitive to the problems inherent in periods of transition and renewal. Right, and so it takes courage, as Dane Rudhyar would say, to embrace the end of things, the ending of cycles, and the qualities needed to move through such often challenging, difficult transcending times. And so it felt very appropriate as we consider this Pisces season of 2023, because it does feel more so than other previous years that this is a time of great endings, that something very profound is ending on this planet and within our species, right? Within our culture, within our worlds. We are in a period of transition. We are in liminal times. So I just wanted to sort of plant the seed, a good Piscean endeavor of calling up this sort of sense of courage. Spiritual courage really would be a great way of describing it. And I always think about Pisces as the spiritual warrior, right? The peaceful but spiritual warrior. And that theme seems to keep coming up as I look at the chart, as I wrote my article for the month on the Pisces season. That notion of spiritual courage is prominent. So with that said, it's a nice foundation for us to start looking at what is really in the astrological weather for us as we begin this Pisces season. And as I'm recording this, it's already Pisces season literally started last night here. So got the chart up for when it did ingress, 5:30 Eastern time on February 18th. We got the sun moving into 0 degrees of Pisces. It's been a kind of a contentious start to the season. The sun is just coming through its own conjunction with Saturn in the late degrees of Aquarius. So there's been an interesting sort of another, again, to this theme of closing chapters, right? We're about to close the chapter on the 2.5-year cycle we've been living through with Saturn moving through Aquarius. And I think of this as a 5-year cycle of Saturn moving through Capricorn and Aquarius, which both of the signs that it traditionally rules. So we've been under this long 5-year Saturnian influence where Saturn has been at its prime, at its peak, if you will. It's the peak, I think, in the Saturn cycle, in this 29.5-year cycle of Saturn. When we look at when it hits Capricorn and Aquarius, these tend to be times that are Saturnian. There are difficulties, there are challenges, there are limits, there are frustrations. There is a sense of an outer authority, limiting and restricting our freedom, our movements, right? And if we look at the last 5 years, we certainly can point to a very Saturnian theme that has emerged for all of us. And so the sun has been, I think, this transit here as the sun ended its time in Aquarius. This is the last time we'll see Saturn in Aquarius for nearly 30 years. And we'll talk a little bit later as Saturn itself is going to move into Pisces during Pisces season, which is one of the big major transits of 2023. I talked about it in my last video. We'll be looking at this probably quite a bit as the year progresses and really seeing what this change of tone is going to imply for us, because it is a shift, between Saturn changing signs, and then next month we're going to get Pluto moving into Aquarius for the beginning of this new era. So a lot of shifting tides, shifting sands, shifting waters. So very appropriate as we drop into Pisces season here officially with the sun moving in. So that's, it's a slow start. There's sort of I feel like it's a sobering quality to beginning of this. It's something that we're being asked to be patient. We're being asked to be a little more dutiful. We're being asked to be a little more practical, right? That we have to let things unfold in good time and in their own time. A respect for time and the limits of time, one of the qualities of Saturn. Now, when I look at the other thing that's interesting on this day is we have Venus, who's just been in her conjunction with Neptune, so that it has been a rather dreamy Piscean quality already, right? We had this as we ended Aquarius season, and this was really probably quite a stimulating time for our imaginations, for our creativity, for our sense of wonder and joy and a romantic notion to everything that is spiritual and transcendent. This is a great sign of, the poet, right? Poetry and expression and music and love and higher love, unconditional love. So that's been a nice sort of conjoining of those two really blissful, ecstatic type energies. So hopefully you got a little bit of contact with that in the last week or so. But now as Venus is moving away from that conjunction, it's coming into this separating sextile with Pluto here at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So this is a very interesting window because on the New Year's Day, as a matter of fact, Venus was conjunct with Pluto back there at, I think it was about 28 degrees. And that's always a descent in the underworld. Whenever Venus conjoins Pluto, as she does, about once a year in her annual cycle, it is the descent into the underworld. It is the myth of Persephone, who was kidnapped by Hades and dragged into the underworld and and raped, and then was fated to spend half a year beneath in the underworld and half the year above. It's a very powerful myth, one that if you're into mythology, I would familiarize yourself with. So we had that descent into the underworld where the Venusian was taken into this intense experience, right? And the idea of the raping of Persephone it's a metaphor. It's a psychological metaphor of she was the virgin who was innocent and naive, but the unconscious drew her to these experiences, and she was profoundly transformed by them. So we've been in this period of, I think, profound transformation. And so now as Venus moves out from that experience and starts to separate here, there's some insight, there's some clarity, normally, right, from that experience. There's something that was processed, some unconscious material that we processed at the beginning of this year is now getting a new light. Of course, it's being colored by a very Piscean experience, and it's being colored by this contact with Neptune. So on the one hand, it may be quite inspirational and quite transformative and very powerful. And some of us may be getting these like really strong psychic feelings, like a really connection to source and to the connection to the cosmos, right? It has this cosmic quality to it. But on the other hand, it can be very deceptive, and we could be deluded. A lot of self-delusion can be a quality of this conjunction as well. So kind of an interesting one to really be feeling our way through. And literally, I think feeling is the right way. What feels right? What feels true? It's not always going to come through the conscious. It's not going to come through the logical. It may be much more emotional. It may be a feeling tone. It may be an intuition, a sensing, right, is more important, particularly during all of Pisces season. It's a time for us to really emerge into our senses, into our feeling nature. We've come from a very logical month in Aquarius and a very logical last couple years, right, with Saturn in Aquarius. So this shift from Aquarius to Pisces is very pronounced during this particular Pisces season, in a way that it wasn't last year, for instance, or the years before that. This is a very unique transition we're moving through. So I want to just accentuate that. And I mentioned Venus because if we track, well, let's just go before, because on the 20th here, let's go by day, we do have a new moon. Technically, let's see if I can get it pretty close here. It's going to be at 1 degree. There we have Sun, Moon, conjunct 1 degree Pisces. And as we've been having, most of the new moons have been occurring at the very early degrees of the sign. It's just kind of the way this rhythm of the cycle is during this period. So we get a nice, Pisces new moon to really inaugurate this Pisces season. So as all the themes we just mentioned, right? And let's pull in this idea of spiritual courage. Let's set the intention to have that courage to be true to our own divinely inspired nature. Would be a cool way of framing that, and one that I've been playing with. Divine inspiration is always a welcomed enlightenment, if you will, right? But we've just had what we would call an endarkenment with the Pluto experience. So can we bring light into the darkness and bring the darkness out into the light? A nice metaphor to consider, and almost a paradox as we begin this Pisces season with this new moon. And then, I think just the next day here, we've got Venus now moving out of Pisces and moving into the sign of Aries. So this is a very different and another very shifting archetype in a way, because Venus in Aries is a challenging period for the goddess of love, right? It's like she's now in Mars's ruled house of Aries. She's in exile. She's far away from her preferred home over in Libra, where she's the ruler. She's in conjunct to her sign of Taurus, where she wants to get to. This is sort of like coming from Pisces and trying to get to Taurus. This is a very tricky transit for Venus. So for all of us, in terms of our relationship energy, our values, what we love, our desire nature, the yummy, delicious, ecstatic parts of our lives are going to be under a lot of pressure during her transit of Aries. It just is. It's like you have to put on, the goddess of love has to put on her love armor. Right? She has to protect her gentle and sensitive heart, because Aries is an area of Mars, of war, of strife, of aggression, of activity, and of violence, right? For better or worse, right? It's energy, but it can express itself in Mars-like ways, right? So Venus is moving through tricky territory. As we're going to see, she's going to join up with Jupiter and Chiron later in the month, which will create a very interesting energy that we'll look at next. So the next major transit coming up is then a couple days later. And as I said, we started the year with a kind of, there wasn't a lot of challenging astrological weather, but as we move into March, April, May, things really do start to crank up for us. So we're starting to feel the momentum and feel the pull of something much sort of stronger starting to manifest with a lot of these transits. And so here, if we look at what's going on, is this interesting transit. It's going to involve Mercury here in this trine with Mars. But it's also squaring Uranus. So this is a very interesting moment in the cycle as Mercury itself gets through these middle degrees of Aquarius. So our minds are going to be really stimulated by this transit. There's going to be a very intense mental and logical type of energy. In contrast to what we've been talking about with all this Piscean energy, here we still have the residue of Aquarius season, as Mercury's in that point in its cycle where it's moving fast and it's going to catch up with the sun and have its next conjunction. But when you get this kind of energy, right? So, first of all, Mars being in Gemini, so we've had this intensification of our mental process, of our thinking, of our communication, of this desire to share information and get hold of good data, of having good, strong opinions, maybe having difficult conversations, right? We had this very long Mars retrograde in Gemini, so this has been a long one. We're still in it, right? So we haven't even moved past the shadow of the retrograde yet. So when you get this This trine, though, it's sort of a nice harmonious relationship with Mercury moving through Aquarius, an air sign, right? The high fixed air idealism of Aquarius. So lots of innovation, lots of interesting ideas could come to you. Very practical, very scientific, revolutionary, right? All of these Aquarian qualities just get invigorated by Mars. And then you bring the square, though, into the picture with Uranus. Like now, all of a sudden, it gets, our inner freak, our inner genius gets stimulated, right? Some very unique individualistic ideas, right? And if we think about Uranus as the natural or modern ruler of Aquarius, there is this sort of mutual receptivity here going on with this square from Uranus and Aquarius, or Uranus and Taurus, I should say. So this is just an interesting one to be alerted for during the next few days and during the few days of this transit while it's in effect. Here we have it exact almost between all three of these. So there'll be something in the air. It's a good time, I always say, when you get these kind of transits, you want to have your antenna up, right? You want to be extra sensitive and attuned to the information that may be coming your way. And it may come from very unexpected sources, right? Uranus, very interesting. And of course, always too, we look at this on the personal, the interpersonal, and then the transpersonal or collective level. This is also a time when I'm always looking for information that comes through all of our various media channels about something different, something weird, something unexpected, something that gets uncovered. This can have, with all three of these combined, either it seems like it could be political or military, right, with Mars, or environmental when it comes to Uranus, or some interesting combination of all three of these. What would involve a political, military, or environmental impact or news item or information that's getting revealed. Of course, we have what's going on in Ohio right now with that train derailment and all of the speculation about what's really going on there with the toxic spill of all those chemicals that were control burned. So it's stuff like that, right? This is the configuration we're literally in for. So we just keep your eyes and ears open for what's going on in the world, and of course eyes and ears open for your own personal transformation and stimulation. It's how you can use these transits to our benefit, if we will. All right, so that's that. What's next? So yeah, I already talked a little bit about coming up here. Let's go to March 2nd. I'm going to move forward here. A lot to get to, but we'll see this this conjunction here with, as I said, that Venus was going to join both Jupiter and Chiron in Aries. And again, I talked about this a little bit in my 2023 preview in one of those videos. It's the configuration for what I call big time healing, right? When you get Jupiter and Chiron together, it really exacerbates that potential for healing. If we think about the role of Chiron as the healer, right? The self-healer in a way. Although, mythically Chiron was immortal, but then had a wound that could not be healed, right? Which was this, again, a real profound paradox, which often mythology forces us to confront these deep paradoxes. But, this one, we've had Chiron moving through Aries for quite a while, and it is a symbol generally of some sort of renewal or new methods of medicine and healing. Now, certainly what we've had with these very advanced, brand new mRNA vaccines, right? That's very much something going on with Chiron and Aries. Very bold, new initiatives in medicine come under the auspices of this transit. This whole period is sort of endemic of that. About a 7-year period it moves through the sign. So that's something worth considering. And with Jupiter there, it just exacerbates, makes everything bigger. It magnifies whatever it touches. So I've been talking about this as something with healthcare seems to be on the horizon, right? Like, a big change, or, you would think this would be connected to big legislation about healthcare or some big announcement. It also is a configuration of what big pharma, right? You can't really get a better archetypal combination than Jupiter and Chiron, right? It's this big pharma. So everything around medicine, and I think the vaccines and the conversations that those are having, as we now have some distance from the direct experience, and sort of the primal fear of the pandemic is sort of waning. The pandemic is apparently officially over here in America, according to the Biden administration. So now we have a little bit of distance from it, and I think we're going to be looking a lot more closely at what the impacts on health of all of these very new, very untested technologies in medicine are actually occurring. So maybe something around that during this month. Who knows? But with Venus moving in there, there's this. What this gives us on a more personal note is I think it's a sense of a renewed regime of self-care, right? I think despite what's going on in the world and the difficulties and challenges of certainly the healthcare system here in the U.S., which has its challenges, I think we're being called to really take responsibility for our own personal well-being. And one of the more, I think, beautiful aspects of Chiron is almost like the shaman of the heavens, right? That as a metaphor, like he's the great natural mystic, the natural healer. Heal thyself, I think, would be one of Chiron's great messages. And so lots of opportunity here, Jupiter opportunity for self-care, Venus, and healing, right? Turning to more, I've been saying this though, this seems to be a symbol of a return to natural methods and a return to preventive care, right? Rather than prescriptive care. Everything in our society now, it's like you just take a pill for that. There's a pill for everything. And again, big pharma, I think there's a breakthrough. I think there's a huge shift for a lot of people who are waking up to the reality of this, this heavily medicated society that we have created for ourselves. And it's like, reclaiming older traditional medicines, plant-based healing, healthier diets, like really being conscious of what are you putting in your body, right? A renewed efforts at more homeopathic methods, natural, something very natural about this, or a call back to nature, return to nature through this signature. And I hope that can come into the bigger picture. The best possible sort of manifestation of a transit like this is like, we do incorporate more of a natural approach into the big healthcare system. I'm not going to hold my breath for that because I don't think that's the way the system is designed. There's no profit. There's no money in natural healing. I mean, there is, but not to the scale of, patented medicines and drugs and vaccines, right? Vaccines fall into this special category that doesn't really need the same kind of rigor and approval from the FDA, right? All of those vaccines were fast-tracked under emergency provisions. And so normally we would spend a decade testing all these vaccines. And basically we are in a worldwide human trial over the last 2 years. So who knows what the results will be. But we should be watching that closely. At least I am. I'm quite interested in how that's all playing out. All right, so that's that. Let's keep moving forward here. I'm going to move forward to, let's go to March 7th. What's happening there in the sky? Well, this is a big deal because, at some point on that day, it's going to be a little later, we're going to see, boom, we've got Saturn officially moving into Pisces. and it won't. It's going to move forward. There's no retrograde. This is it. This is a line of demarcation. So this 5-year Saturn period, right, as it went through both Capricorn and Aquarius, both signs it rules, now it's just dropping into Pisces. And so this is a real shift. And I've described this as it's going to be a sense of like, it's almost like Saturn has to let go of the reins. It's been really in control through this last 5 years as it's been moving through its own signs. And like I said, we've been under the Saturnian restraints in a big, profound way. As it moves into Pisces, it almost is forced to let go reluctantly. Saturn doesn't let go of anything easily, but that is the sort of the metaphor, as if it's kind of like, that tension gets released. And I think initially this is going to feel very like a welcoming relief, I think, right? We're all like, thank fucking God, right? Like, the restrictions and the difficulties and the challenges that we've had for the past 3 years under this very difficult global pandemic, and all of the social and political and cultural implications of this period. It's not just the pandemic. It's been a concoction of challenges that we've undergone. So initially it's going to feel very like a relief. But one of the things I think as we have to watch out for during this transit, this 2.5-year period, is once the control is restricted, there is sort of the potential for the descent into chaos, right? Where there's no order, there is disorder, right? Where there are not rules and limitations, there is the boundless and the unorganized and the chaotic. And so, we have to be aware of the potential for, there's this sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater quality to this transit, where all of the structures and limitations and restrictions and hierarchies and rules and laws that seem restrictive and that are up for review may be too quickly dispensed with, and you end up throwing away things that are of value. This is a potential with a transit like this. And again, this always applies to us personally. You can apply that to your personal level. What good rules, restrictions, disciplines, what practical structure have you built in your life over the past 5 years, but that now starts to feel a little limiting and restrictive, and you kind of just want to let go, and you just want to just chill. You just want to chill. But there's this, you could throw away something that's very valuable and something you've earned, hard-earned things during this transit. And we can get lost. We can get, you can literally get carried away, Pisces, by the waters of Pisces. There's this image I have of, it's just like this massive wave of change that's waiting to come and is percolating in different, parts of our society and our culture. And there is this desire to really, to be freed and to be redeemed, right? All these Piscean qualities. We just want to be saved, right? This is the, Pisces, the sign of Jesus, right? The Savior, the Redeemer, right? Is one of the archetypes of this sign. The martyr, the scapegoat, right? So there's so much difficulty that we can get into here with Pisces, particularly as vulnerable as we are as a society in a lot of ways. So I'm a little cautious about Saturn's ingress into Pisces and what is going to transpire over the next couple of years, particularly because we're going to have Pluto moving into Aquarius starting next month. And these two planets shifting over the next 18 months is really going to be interesting for us to keep our eyes on as astrologers and as sort of aware, conscious beings, because we really want to be able to manifest the energy in its most we want to manifest the gifts, right? So the courage, what is the courage it's going to take for all of us to endure this transitional period? So, it's interesting that the very day that Saturn ingresses into Pisces, it is the day of the full moon. We have a Virgo full moon on that day, on March 7th, which I think is really appropriate. It's a very symbolic sort of demarcation of the inauguration of this 2.5 year cycle. If you think about what a full moon in Virgo requires, right? It does require an attention to detail and some patience and some discipline and some grounding in the facts, right? As opposed to the desire of Pisces to just let go and just get carried away and adrift in the sea, where you could get pulled out by the strong undertow and thrown out and literally be lost at sea. There's something about the need symbolized here for a grounding in reality, a grounding in facts, a grounding in the details, to be critically aware, to be analytical, right? To be focused. Don't get distracted by the dream, the fantasy, the illusion, the delusion, right? I think this whole period we're dipping our toes in these concepts of the metaverse, right? We've got all this craziness about AI with this chat GTP and Bing and what that's manifesting. And that is all about those Pluto and Aquarius, the beginning of that phase. We are going to be dealing with and experiencing a lot of the challenges of that kind of Aquarian technology and this new frontier we're moving into. It's just the way it is. So, as we start this Pisces, the Saturn and Pisces part of the story, this is really interesting to me as the inauguration, and I'm thinking about how valuable this full moon may be in helping to illuminate how we're supposed to navigate this next couple years. It's like setting a tone. And it'll be very interesting. There's a lot. We'll probably talk quite a bit more over the coming months about this transit, especially once Pluto moves in. We'll be talking about it again next month for sure. But, one of the themes I think that is emerging for me is what I'm calling the great unwinding, right? It's like a lot of the structures, and again, we've been talking about the shift from Capricorn to Aquarius that this Pluto transit is symbolizing. The structures are shifting. They're all the old ways, the institutions, the hierarchies, right? All the systems and the incredible complexity in the world. We've reached a peak, right? It's unsustainable in many ways. And there's some hard realities we have to face in making this transition, right? But I feel like there's also going to be a lot of diluted thinking over the next couple of years that could really cloud our judgment in ways that could be super detrimental. But in general, this is an unwinding. This is a great change, right? And I always remind myself that change is the only constant in the universe and that change is necessary, right? But change can be difficult. It can be disrupting. It can be unpleasant. It can be painful, particularly if you're attached to what's being changed. If you're attached to the old modalities, it's going to be a bumpy fucking ride, right? And a lot of people will be very much attached to the old ways. They are not going to let go of the reins, right, so easily. They're going to hold on with all their might, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to retain the past and the traditions and the ways of life. That's the only way they know. And they see this change as they don't recognize this future we're moving into, and they don't see a place for themselves in it. So their instinct, their whole biology is going to force them to hold on to the past. And this is the shift from Capricorn to Aquarius. This will be that Plutonian transit for the next 18 months. It's going to exacerbate these almost two camps. Like, which side are you on? Are you willing to move into the future, to the unknown, to the uncertainty of a new and untried paradigm, which it is, right? Or do you want to cling on to the true, the known and the trusted of the past despite its failures and the fact that it's crumbling all around you? So this is going to probably play out as it has been along very divided cultural lines, unfortunately, but that's just the times we're living through right now. But hopefully we can all align ourselves to our own truth, our own path. We each have our own individual journey that is unfolding for us. We all were born at this time to have this experience, to experience the world through these times. So hopefully we can find the spiritual courage that it's going to take to get through. And we get a nice, just to end on a bit of a high note, because I feel like the culmination of this Pisces season, if we move to, oops, not that far, one day at a time, Valerie Bertinelli. Little 70s sitcom TV reference for those old enough to get that one. March 16th, we get Sun-Neptune conjunction here, along with Mercury. So this is a really kind of dreamy aspect, right? Like I think of this as the potentially to align self with soul, right? There's this the Sun and Neptune, our solar purpose, our identity, our individual sense of self is aligned with the transcendental, the spiritual, the soul, the sense of, understanding that we are all source, right? We are all stardust, right? And it's a beautiful song, right? And it's a beautiful metaphor, but it also happens to be scientifically true, right? We are of the stars. We are being programmed by the energy of the stars. I often think about the fact that the neutrino, which is the latest understanding of the energy patterns of the universe, right? It's like they're like these small particles. There's like at any given time there are, I think, 30 trillion of them going through the size of a thumbnail, right? Like we are in this, as the human design inventor Ra Uru Hu says, it was like a neutrino ocean. We're literally swimming in an ocean of information. And so this is one of those signatures where we are much more attuned and sensitive to this ocean of information that is coming to us from the sun and from all the other stars and even from Jupiter, which produces neutrinos. So this will be one of those times when, the veils get lifted, right? The veil between the two worlds becomes a little more permeable during these kinds of transits. And with Mercury there coming into its conjunction with the sun, we will be of one mind. The opportunity to be of one mind, with the one mind, with the overmind, with the great mind, with the higher mind. Really beautiful time for quiet meditation and contemplation about what is really important. Who am I? Why am I here? What should I be doing? What is the best use of this life? Now it's a little tricky because you can see it's getting this very exact square from our friend Mars over here in Gemini. So this will just create a little bit of, perturb this beautiful mystic mental state that we are getting the opportunity to witness. It will be distracting. It's going to try to pull us into the mundane and the everyday and the details of the secular world that are constantly vying for our attention, the screens and the TV and right? So challenge to, can you tune all of that out, right? This is all about frequency and attunement, right? You want to tune out the noise so that you can get the clearest signal possible, because despite all the challenges and all of the delusional deception that Pisces can deliver, it also can give us the clearest, most unadulterated messages possible, like direct signal from the cosmos. So that's always worth the effort to tune into. So that's kind of the take, or my take anyway, on Pisces season 2023. Next month is going to get really interesting. We're going to talk about Pluto going into Aquarius for a while and all that entails. We've got the spring equinox. All that Aries energy is going to continue. So we're in for a very interesting part of the astrological year, or this calendar year, I should say. As we end this astrological year and start another one, it's going to start with a real intensity, I think, that should set the stage for the rest of 2023. So hopefully you'll join me for that next time. If you like this content, like and subscribe if you would. Hit the notification bell so you get an update on when I publish these videos. I hope they're helpful. I hope it can help you navigate the astrological weather for this month and arm you with at least a decent cosmic umbrella, right? All right. Well, until next time, Sat Nam, everyone.